speaking skills yet, but I've learned I can do a little bit of writing. And so what I prepared today is kind of my testimony. I'm going to read off here, and it's going to be a little hard to try to keep it within a timely manner because there's so much to say and how much God has worked in our lives. So without further ado, let me go ahead and start reading. 1 year ago, on September 19th, our lives changed forever. It started off just like any other day. I woke up at 6, got my coffee ready, packed my lunch, woke up at Ava and Caleb at 6:20, then 6:25, then 6:30, and then finally again at 6:35 after using my dad voice. But before I left, I gave Annie, Ollie, and Grayson kisses goodbye. Then Ava gave me a big hug with a loud, "I love you, Daddy!" And then Caleb gave me a half-asleep, mumbly voice, "Love you." And I was off to work, not even knowing what was going to happen. All routine. Annie picked up Ava and Caleb from school and was home by 3:15. Caleb saw his friend Gavin already home waiting for Caleb to join up with him. Normally Gavin wouldn't be home at this time, so Caleb was extra excited to see him and couldn't hide his excitement as he was trying to get out of the van. He had snack duty that day at school, so he tried grabbing the entire box of fruit snacks left over from his class. Needless to say, Annie stopped him, grabbed 2 packets and said, "Now, one is for you, and one you can give, and the other one you can give to Gavin." Caleb let out an excited laugh as he's running to Gavin, turns around and says, "This is the best day ever!" And he was off to Gavin's house. Now, normally the boys have their designated play area behind Gavin's house, but since we live in a cul-de-sac and the neighbor's house down the street is connected to Gavin's yard, and he lived along the highway. But just so happens that day, they were up by the garage and found a mini electric motorcycle that Gavin had recently gotten. Now, just a week before, Caleb had begged me one day to take off his training wheels from his bike because he was at his cousin's and they had shown him how to ride a 2-wheeled bike at Meanwhil's house. So seeing this 2-wheeled electric bike, Caleb sparked interest. Caleb hopped on, turned the handle, and was surprised on how quick it took off. He didn't know how to stop as he shot down their long driveway straight for the highway. He tried steering from the road but couldn't gain control and went into the road as a tanker semi was driving past. Caleb went under the trailer, hit his head on what we're thinking on the air brake box, and the rear tire ran over his belt line. The driver was just heading through town, just routine, and felt a jolt. He suddenly hit the brakes, thinking they had blown a tire, looked in his rearview mirror and saw Caleb's lifeless body laying in the middle of the road. Completely shocked, he jumped out of the semi, started running to Caleb, having to turn back around to grab his phone to call 911. The woman, our new good friend Sarah, was behind the semi and saw everything, and ran up to Caleb. There happened to be somebody nearby who witnessed the accident and came up too, holding his head straight, as Sarah comforted him, telling him that everything was going to be alright and Mommy would be here soon. When the ambulance showed up, Lifeline was en route from Rockford to Walnut and set to land at the nearest open lot, which happened to be 1 mile away at the Garland Funeral Home. When the EMTs had Caleb loaded up and ready to go, they radioed Lifelight to get the ETA on when and where they were going to be. They radioed back saying they're about 15 minutes out. One of the first responders decided they couldn't wait the 15 minutes and said to meet at Perry Memorial Hospital, the next town over. By that time, I had been notified and was on my way to the hospital. I remember crying as I was driving, begging God not to take our son. On my way to the hospital, I immediately called Pastor Patrick first and had asked if he could get some calls going to start a prayer chain. He prayed with me over the phone, asking for God's protection over Caleb and the doctors as they worked on Caleb. As I was coming into Princeton, I saw a Lifeline flying towards the hospital. And when I arrived, I was taken into a small room where I met Susan, Gavin's grandmother, a hospital advocate, praying and comforting Annie. I felt numb and clammy as I thought Caleb hadn't made it. We prayed and then were taken into the triage room where the medical staff were working on Caleb. Both Annie and I were able to stand by Caleb, crying, telling him, "Don't stop fighting, Bubba. You're strong. You can get through this." As we were praying to God out loud, watch over our boy and heal him, I remember someone saying, "I'm starting CPR if no one is opposed to it." Both Annie and I were still completely numb, knees buckling and crying as we found out Caleb was going into cardiac arrest. We were led to the other side of the room to sit down as they were trying to revive Caleb, still shouting to Caleb, "Keep fighting, Bubba," and telling him that he is so strong and Mommy and Daddy need you. As Annie sat in the chair across the room, I remember looking down and seeing one of Caleb's favorite shirts and his shorts just cut off of him and thrown in the corner with just one shoe. I found out later on the other shoe was lost along the road from the impact. They revived Caleb, took us out of the room, and proceeded to load him up onto the gurney to transport him. And when we walked into the hall, I remember seeing the Princeton and Walnut EMTs and police lined up along the back wall as life flight and emergency room staff prepared Caleb for transport. One of the life flight nurses took down our information so they could let us know that Caleb had made it to OSF in Peoria safely. Earlier that year, when our youngest son Oliver was just 3 weeks old, he was life flighted off to OSF because he had RSV and pneumonia. So we should be getting a call about halfway to Peoria. The hospital advocate prayed with us, handed me a card from her church, and let me know that her and her church would be praying for Caleb. After she prayed with us, Brian Moore, the first Christian pastor, he's also an EMT, prayed with us. Caleb was loaded up and wheeled out the door after Annie and I had given him a kiss and once again told him to keep fighting. Susan drove us to OSF in Peoria, and every mile closer my heart would sink more and more, wondering why we weren't getting a call from Lifelight. We arrived to the hospital not knowing what the fate of our son and scared to death to go into those doors. I told the lady at the reception desk who we were, and she said, "One moment, please," as she picked up the phone and told someone on the other end that Caleb Clausen's parents had arrived. A nurse came in and told us to follow her. We were led into the elevators, still clueless of if Caleb had even made the flight. We went to the 4th floor and were heading towards the conference room. Both Annie and I were already scared to death. We knew there had to be only one reason why we were headed to a conference room, to be told that our son didn't make it. Then the nurse told us that she wasn't sure exactly where to go, so she was putting us up there for now until she could get the medical team to come to us. I think she could see the fear in both Annie's faces when we saw the conference room. After what felt like an eternity, Caleb's medical team came in to tell us that Caleb was still alive, in surgery, but in very bad shape. They gave us a plan of action. I couldn't really tell you exactly what it was. Both Annie and I were crying, thanking God for keeping Caleb safe on his flight to Peoria and keeping him alive. We were then led into a private waiting room as we waited with family and friends. During the waiting period, we started visiting with family and escaping what was going on and what happened to Caleb, only to have a memory pop up and tear us away from the laughing and fellowship straight into tears. I have to add here, I can laugh on it now, but while we were in the waiting room, I was given the number to the hospital staff and said if there's any updates, we will either come in and let you know or just keep your phone on you because we're going to call you with an update. And many of you all know Peoria's area code is 309. And I'm sitting there go and sitting there, we're visiting, and all of a sudden I get a 309 calling on my phone. Hello? And they're like, yes, is this Ben Clausen? I was like, yes, it is. All right, Ben, I have good news. I was like, thank you. What is it? It's like, well, this is MediaCom. We can get you a great deal on a cable package. Now here's my little plug for OtterBox. They do a very good job protecting phones being thrown across the room. But they didn't call again. So over the course of the next 5 hours or so, we had visits from different surgeons telling us what they did and that he is in very bad shape. But very lucky, because every surgery, ranging from getting a suprapubic catheter installed to having a section of the skull removed, was a success. After the last surgeon of the night gave their report to us, we waited a bit more, and a man in a flight suit came in. He introduced himself as Jake, a flight nurse, and took care of Caleb on his flight. Caleb's accident impacted the entire flight team so hard, and he was at the hospital again for another less serious patient and had to see how Caleb was doing. He was very happy to see how well Caleb did and looked. He said he'd be praying for us and we can go in to see Caleb. Annie and I both thanked him and gave him a big hug as he led us into Caleb's room. Caleb looked very peaceful, yet different. He was hooked up to a couple dozen machines, like as in 24, with tubes and wires everywhere, a breathing tube in, which just didn't look natural with his chest, rise and fall of his chest. His head was shaved back with sutures across his head going from ear to ear, and 2 coolers of donated blood ready for transfusion, but Caleb was alive. Over the next 7 weeks at OSF, we had come to know other families in their dark times. One family who came in to recognize us had recognized us and had been following Caleb's story. Their son Caden, already in his young life, had multiple heart surgeries and defied all odds stacked against him. But he wasn't in PICU this time for his heart. He just simply fell off his bike and hit his head. He was going through a similar neurosurgeries as Caleb, and his family would share daily updates his family and us would share daily updates with each other. Until one day, we passed his room, and his bed was empty. We were heartbroken to find out that he didn't make it. Annie told me that when days are really tough, and she's at the end of her rope, she thinks of Caden's family and how they lost him. That gives her motivation to press on and not to give up, because we have felt the survivor's guilt, and we have asked God, why couldn't he pull through? We have thought non-stop about his family and how coming up soon, they'd be nearing an anniversary too. Only his would be the anniversary of when their son gained their wings. But on the flip side, we met another family with a little girl named Molly. She was in for a procedure with her heart. It was likely to be unsuccessful, but the last try before being referred to Lurie's Children's Hospital in Chicago for a heart transplant. Well, the procedure didn't go as planned, and she was life-flighted out to Chicago to be put on the transplant list. For a while, we didn't hear about her and how she was doing, until one day we found her family story on Facebook and reached out to her mother. Molly ended up getting her new heart and was released months after Caleb was home, and she, in fact, started her first day of kindergarten the same day that Caleb returned to school. My first time I went home after Caleb's accident, I sat down in our van, looked back, and saw Caleb's empty booster seat, and just cried. Returning home was haunting. Our normal, chaotic house was quiet and frozen in time. The toys were left in the yard, ingredients set out for supper that night were still on the counter, and everything was just as we left it. At that moment, I felt helpless and scared. My baby boy had a problem, and that I, as a father who fixes everything, could not fix it. I fell to my knees, crying to God, "Please give me strength, Lord. I cannot do this alone, and I need your help. It is as if I had something broken, and I tried fixing it myself, but I couldn't. So I took it to my father for him to fix. Now earlier for the prelude, there was a song that played. It means so much to us. It's called Just Be Held, and it's by the Casting Crows, and I had requested it. Because every word of that song was as if God was using them to speak the words I needed to hear. And it has gotten me through the toughest of times during the past year. Especially the phrase, your world's not falling apart, it's just falling into place. How strong is that? When all we could think about what was happening and how different our lives were going to be, God used those words. Your world is not falling apart. It's just falling into place. Just the way I have planned for you and your children and your family and your child and your church and your lives. No, it wouldn't be the same again, and you won't understand it right now. But just have faith, and you will see. That song means so much to me now, and I highly suggest you listen to the words that we sang. Just be held by the casting crows. Or casting crowns, I'm sorry. Needless to say, after praying out loud on my knees, in the silence of our empty house, I felt a sense of strength come over me. It was like everything was going to be okay. Before every surgery, we felt like we were kissing Caleb goodbye for the last time, but God protected him, and the surgeries turned out better than the surgeons anticipated. There were plenty of months during Caleb's stay early on that we thought that this is it. There's no way he's going to pull through this. His brain was swelling above where they wanted the pressure to be, and they tried to lower it with little success, which led to the neurosurgeon to remove another piece of his skull to relieve pressure. We were told by an intensive care doctor and a neurosurgeon at 2 different points that we need to start preparing for Caleb's future. Due to his injuries, he would likely never wake up fully and to be stuck in this vegetative state the rest of his life. He may never be able to eat on his own again and have to keep a machine to breathe for him. And when I was told that, I told the neurosurgeon, well, I guess I'm going to have to pray harder then. We even had to sit down with one of our favorite intensive care doctors to get a consult on what to expect if they had to put a tracheotomy tube in. And in his words, he said, when we do this test to see if Caleb is able to breathe on his own, it would be a miracle if he passes and doesn't need it. Well, I don't think that intensivist knew who we had on our side. Needless to say, Caleb passed the test with flying colors and woke up just fine and has been eating great. During Caleb's stay at OSF and Chicago at the Shirley Ryan Bilby Lab, Caleb surprised us daily with new miracles from God. We learned all about the events that unfolded that fateful day and how God had everything synchronized just perfect. Going back to the day of the accident, everything happened just as it should have. Let's just say, if Annie didn't stop Caleb to give him 2 packets of fruit snacks and just let him go with a whole box, who knows what would have happened with the timeline when if Caleb had just been on the road just milliseconds sooner. He could have been hit head on by the entire tanker truck and all. But he wasn't. It just so happened at the right time to be run over by the lightest part of the truck. When he was run over, the electric scooter took most of the weight of the empty trailer. Yes, God allowed the trailer to be empty. The truck driver, the bystander, and the passerby all have had EMT experience and could keep calmer than most. The gentleman who held Caleb's head into place knew how to keep him stable so he wouldn't choke on his own blood. The woman, our friend Sarah, is a special education teacher's aide and has a calming voice of reassurance to tell Caleb, in the scariest point of his young life, letting him know that everything was going to be all right. All of those angels that God chose to be with Caleb at that point were Christians and prayed over him. I was told later by Jake, the flight nurse, when he came to Chicago to visit Caleb, that whoever made the decision to take Caleb straight to the hospital rather than being picked up by a life flight saved his life. Had he gone with the original plan, Caleb wouldn't have made the flight to the hospital because they would not have the needed blood on board to transfuse to Caleb. Jake also told Annie and I that normally when somebody with a head injury goes into cardiac arrest for as long as he did, the results are grave. And he said that medically speaking, Caleb should be in a vegetative state and have life-lasting effects. But it is pure miracle that he is doing so well. Seeing the little bits and pieces of this day of Caleb's accident, I can't say how anybody can look at this and not see God. Every piece fell into place perfectly thanks to God. Not only has God shown miracles through Caleb's recovery, but He's shown miracles through our family, community, and Facebook. I have had countless messages through Prayers for Caleb's page of love, hope, and encouragement. I have been told that through our faith in Caleb's miraculous recovery, that people have been led to the Lord and their faith has been restored. Other miracles God has come to show us comes from the verse of 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10, which reads, Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Whether our family or community realized it or not, they were living examples of this verse. We've had an appliance store donate a washing machine to us because they somehow found out that the day before the accident ours broke beyond logical repair. Or a local auto shop donated their time and money to fix my Trailblazer because I found out actually at lunch that day at work before the accident that it needed a $500 part to fix the power steering. I found that I have quit using the phrase, I don't know how much more of this I could take, because God let me know. We've had family pause their busy lives to take our 3 other children during this time. A daycare let Grayson stay for free of charge until I was able to go back to work. And numerous businesses and people have donated money to help with any expenses needed during our stay at the hospital. We've had people randomly show up at the hospital representing their church and telling us they felt that God just wanted them to come up and pray with us. One couple from Galesburg gave Annie and I a care basket and Bethlehem crosses. And I keep this cross everywhere I go. Through this experience, God has brought us closer to Him and strengthened mine and Annie's marriage stronger than ever. He has shown us the power of prayer, and with faith of a mustard seed, we really can move mountains. What is deemed impossible by man is just a prayer away to make it possible. Today, Caleb is just 2 surgeries away from being completely tubeless, but he has been attending school a few hours a day for 3 days a week and attends therapy 2 days a week in Bettendorf. He's running every chance he can and wakes up every morning with a smile on his face, just happy to be alive. We have gone about a month and a half now without him eating, with him eating and taking his meds 100% orally without the need of his G-tube. Our plan is to having the G-tube removed when he gets through the last surgery. Some sayings that Annie wanted me to share that she found and that's helped us are, God doesn't cause these things to happen, but what He promises in that is that He works all things together for the good of those who love Him. And in the midst of the hard time, try to remember the purpose in it. Purpose in it is in who you become through it, what you learn from it, and how you choose to move forward through it to inspire others with it. Through all of this, we have reached out to the truck driver and forgave him. We have made peace knowing that everything that happens for a reason, and this is part of who God wants Caleb to be. Thank you for everybody for your prayers throughout this. Thank you, Lord, for giving us the opportunity to celebrate your love and miracles you have shown through our son. Thank you for coming out here today to celebrate with us and hear Caleb's story. Thank you.